People inside the Cleveland Browns building have started using a specific word to describe Shedeur Sanders. Not fans, not media members working from highlight reels and box scores. People who watch this quarterback operate every single day in practice. People who have been in professional football long enough to develop a finely calibrated sense of what separates the ones who are good from the ones who are genuinely different. And the word they keep landing on is aura. I want to unpack that word today because I don't think it's being used loosely. I think it's being used with precision, and understanding what it actually means in this specific context tells you something important about where Shedeur Sanders is heading. But I want to start somewhere unexpected because I think the most revealing thing that happened around this team recently has nothing to do with a practice report or a coaching quote. The younger players on the Cleveland Browns organized and held the first ever Cleveland for Christ event. Shedeur was there, not in the way players show up to community events when the PR department schedules it, in the way that actually means something, present and engaged and giving his time to people who showed up because they needed something real. And when you look at who else was there alongside him, you see Mason Graham, you see Dylan Sampson, you see the young core of players who are going to define what this franchise looks like for the next half decade. These aren't veterans checking a box. These are young men choosing to spend time together outside the building, outside football, building the kind of trust that eventually shows up on the field in ways you can't manufacture through film sessions alone. I'm not going to turn this into anything beyond what it is. The point isn't theological. The point is consistency. Shedeur Sanders is the same person after wins that he is after losses, the same person in front of cameras that he is when the cameras leave, the same person at a community event that he is on a sideline or in a film room. In a league where image management is essentially a full-time job for most visible players, that kind of consistency is rarer than people acknowledge, and teammates feel the difference between someone performing authenticity and someone who actually carries it. That gap, experienced daily over the course of an offseason, shapes what a locker room becomes. Isaiah Bond has been talking about his offseason, and what he said matters more than the surface of it. He added around 15 pounds of muscle during the offseason. Deliberate, focused physical investment that tells you exactly where his mindset is going into this year. But the part that I keep thinking about is what he described about his connection with Shedeur. They came out of college together. The relationship was already there before either of them put on an NFL uniform. That's not nothing. Chemistry between a quarterback and a wide receiver isn't something that gets built purely through repetitions, though repetitions matter enormously. It gets built through shared language, shared history, the specific kind of trust that makes a receiver release off the line differently because somewhere in the back of his mind, he knows the ball is going to find him even when the coverage looks bad. Bond and Sanders carry that into every practice. And Bond coming into year 2 bigger, physically improved with a full offseason of system work behind him. That's a real developing weapon, and the connection powering it was already established before the first Cleveland snap was ever taken. Now let me get to Cameron Wolfe's reporting from early June, because this is where things get specific in a way I need to walk through carefully. Wolfe reported that Shedeur Sanders has had a genuinely strong final stretch of OTAs, strong enough that people inside the Browns building have been telling him directly, "This kid is impressing us." The growth in his processing speed, in the way he's moving through his progression reads downfield rather than locking onto his first option, has been one of the most visible improvements anyone has tracked. And then Wolfe reported that someone inside that building reached for the word aura to describe what Sanders brings to the practice field. That was the word they chose. Not energy, not presence, aura. Wolfe also included the honest criticism, and I appreciate that he did because it tells you the reporting is real rather than promotional. Shedeur holds the ball too long sometimes. That's a genuine part of his game right now. Anyone who watches him honestly knows it. The point isn't that he's beyond criticism. The point is that the same people raising the criticism are also the ones saying the development is undeniable. They're holding both things simultaneously, which means the praise isn't being offered as consolation. When a critic says yes, but the growth is real, that but carries more weight than pure endorsement from someone who was already sold. Wolfe also reported something about the timeline of the quarterback competition that I think deserves more attention than it received. Monken said early in the offseason that he wanted a decision made before training camp. That window, according to Wolfe, has shifted. And the reason it's shifted is Shedeur Sanders. The competition is too genuinely close, too legitimately unresolved to force a premature announcement. On Tuesday of one practice week, Watson led most of the first team offense. On Wednesday, it was Shedeur, alternating days, genuinely open. Munkin told reporters directly, "One day I lean one direction, the next day I lean the other." That's not a head coach managing a narrative. That is a head coach describing exactly what his eyes are showing him. Now, come back to the aura conversation with me, because I think when people hear that word attached to Shedeur Sanders, the immediate instinct is to connect it to the cultural orbit he carries. The famous father, the social media presence, the spotlight that followed him well before any NFL team drafted him. And I understand that instinct. But that's not what NFL insiders mean when they reach for that word. The aura that veterans and coaches describe in professional football is not something that gets handed down. It's not inherited through bloodline or built through follower counts. It gets constructed through consistent action, over time, in moments that the audience never sees. It's showing up to a community event when no one required it. It's getting on the plane after that preseason sideline comment from Dylan Gabriel and walking over to address it directly, rather than letting it sit and fester into something ugly. It's responding to every round of public doubt, not with words, but with how you practice the next morning. It's being genuinely present for your teammates in the ways that don't generate highlights. All of that accumulates. The aura is what it looks like from the outside when someone has built something real on the inside. When the person you see in front of cameras is actually the person who exists when the cameras are gone. NFL veterans have spent enough time around people who perform one version of themselves publicly and live a different one privately that they recognize immediately when they're dealing with someone who is actually, genuinely consistent. That recognition is what produces the word aura. It's not mystical, it's earned. This is why I get frustrated when the Shedeur conversation gets reduced entirely to statistics and win-loss records, as if those numbers exist in a vacuum completely separate from everything surrounding them. Film matters, numbers matter. I love detailed analytical work, but there is something that determines whether a team competes hard for its quarterback when the season turns difficult, and it does not show up in a passer rating. It shows up in a 2-win team that had every reason to stop caring, playing with genuine fight during the last stretch of a season that was already over. And I want to ask a question that I think deserves a real, uncomfortable answer. Why didn't that same defensive roster play that way for the other quarterbacks? The defense was there. The talent on the roster existed before Shedeur took his first snap. But when he was playing, something shifted in how that team competed, and when he wasn't, it didn't. You can go through all the statistical caveats: sample size, opponent quality, variance, the 100 legitimate analytical qualifiers that apply when you're talking about a small number of games. I've heard every version of that argument. And then I come back to the same question. A team with nothing left to play for went out and fought every week once a specific rookie quarterback stepped onto the field. That's a real phenomenon. Explaining it away with sample size disclaimers is easier than sitting with what it actually implies about who Shedeur Sanders is to the people around him. I want to walk you through a specific play now because everything I've been describing can feel abstract until you see it materialized in a real moment. This is Cleveland and Chicago, somewhere in the latter portion of last season. Watch what Shedeur does when a play completely collapses around him. Pre-snap, he's reading the field, working through his keys, the safety depth, the cornerback leverage, how the coverage structure is going to interact with the route combinations his receivers are running. Malachi Corley is on an out. Harold Fanner has a choice route, adjustable based on coverage. David Njoku is dragging underneath as the check down. Jerry Jeudy doing what Jeudy does, which is find space by instinct when the design structure isn't there. This is a functioning offense with real complexity, and Shedeur is processing all of it simultaneously before the snap. He identifies the out as his primary read. His arm starts its motion, and then a 300-pound defensive lineman wraps his arms around him from behind. This is a sack. Categorically, unambiguously, this is a sack. Every coaching manual in the NFL says the same thing. When you're in the grasp, you go down, you protect the football, you protect your body, and you play the next down. That's the correct answer. That's what quarterbacks who understand risk management do in that moment. Shedeur does not go down. He keeps his feet moving. He keeps his eyes going downfield. And from underneath the defender who has full leverage on his body, with his arm being pulled away from the throw, he delivers a ball to Harold Fanner. Fanner is getting held. There is contact on that route that gets flagged more often than not. The throw itself is not a spiral you'd use in a quarterback tutorial. It's a contested, arm-pinned, everything wrong delivery that has no business being catchable. And Fanner catches it for a first down. Here's what I think was actually happening in Shedeur's mind in that fraction of a second. I think he saw the contact on Fanner and made a calculation. If I throw this ball into coverage that's already holding, the worst outcome is a pass interference call and 15 yards of free yardage. I don't think he expected the completion. I think he was making a football decision about floor outcomes and accepting whatever result came back. And then Harold Fanner went ahead and actually caught the ball, which turned a smart play into something that made press box observers genuinely look twice. But here's why this this play matters beyond the acrobatics of it. What this moment communicates to a wide receiver, what it communicates to every receiver on that roster, is that their quarterback is not going to abandon a throw when the play breaks down, that they will get a chance to make something happen even when logic says the play is already dead. Harold Fanner ran his next route differently after that. Malachi Corley did. Isaiah Bond did. Because when a quarterback fights through a sack to find a completion, it doesn't just affect the play. It affects every subsequent route run by every receiver who was on that field. They know from direct evidence that the ball might find them even when it shouldn't. That knowledge changes how they play. It changes the energy they bring to third downs when the pocket is already collapsed. It changes what they believe is possible when everything has gone sideways. That effect is real. You cannot create it with scheme. You cannot coach it into existence. It comes from a specific kind of quarterback doing a specific kind of thing in a moment where no one would have blamed him for taking the easy option. This is the actual substance underneath the aura conversation. Not the celebrity proximity, not the cultural following, not the famous father or the massive platform. It's this play against Chicago. It's the Cleveland for Christ event. It's the conversation on the plane after the preseason comment. It's the community work after the gas explosion that devastated parts of the city. It's every moment where Shedeur was the same person he always is, regardless of audience or circumstance, regardless of whether it served his image or cost him something. The aura is the residue of all of that. It's what accumulates when a person is actually consistent rather than performing consistency. And when NFL personnel, people who have spent careers around professional athletes and have long since lost the capacity to be impressed by surface qualities, reach specifically for that word, they're naming something real that their normal evaluative language doesn't quite capture. The competition in Cleveland is not settled. I want to say that plainly because everything I've described doesn't override the reality that this decision has not been made. Deshaun Watson has been practicing. The alternating first-team reps are genuine. Todd Monken is a first-year head coach running his own program, and he is not going to hand this job to anyone on the basis of OTA impressions and insider quotes and one play against the Bears that made people in the press box do a double take. He's going to run the competition through mandatory minicamp and into training camp, accumulating evidence until he has enough of it to make a decision he can stand behind when the season begins. But the direction the evidence keeps pointing, the OTA development, Monken's own inability to close the door on a rookie quarterback even when the veteran is practicing well, the teammate investment, the processing improvements, the way coaches talk about Shedeur when they're speaking directly rather than carefully, all of it is orienting toward the same conclusion. And it's not orienting there because of his name or his story or the cultural moment around him. It's orienting there because of what people inside that building watch every single day and can't honestly discount. The word they keep using is aura, and I've spent a lot of time sitting with what that word actually means in the context of professional football, and here's where I've landed. Aura is not a gift. It's not a byproduct of visibility or fame or having lived an interesting life before you arrived at this level. It is the specific quality that gets built when a person's public behavior and private behavior are the same thing, when the version of you that shows up for cameras is genuinely identical to the version that exists when no one is watching or recording or ready to write something down. It gets built through sustained consistency in moments that require nothing from you and that you choose anyway. It gets built through the accumulation of decisions that cost something small and mean something large. Shedeur Sanders has been building this for years. The NFL is only now getting an extended, sustained, daily look at it. And from everything I'm watching, and from everything the people physically closest to it are saying, what they're seeing is not a quarterback trying to figure out how to function at this level. What they're seeing is a quarterback who was always meant to be at this level, finally standing in the place where everything he built before this moment actually gets to matter.